Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of the Free West Media YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed to it yet, please do so because we've got a lot of interesting conversations coming up. And this is precisely such a one at the moment. I'm speaking again to Nicole Barlow. She's a well-known author in South Africa and she's also well-traveled and spends a lot of time in the UK. And today we're talking about censorship and persecution in the UK. So
Yeah.
what are you seeing there, Nicole? I mean, this
Well, I
is a
think
hot
it's,
topic.
yeah, definitely. So it is definitely a major problem. I mean, Elon Musk brings it up regularly when he challenges Keir Starmer. I mean, Starmer's now got a nickname called Stasi Starmer, and he didn't get that nickname for nothing. He got that nickname because he is he is basically become sort of semi-fascist communist in his outlook and in his prime ministerial sort of actions and that. And I think no more so than free speech. I mean, free speech is dead in the UK. And I say that with all sincerity. I don't say that to be provocative or anything like that, but free speech is dead in the UK. And it didn't necessarily start with Keir Starmer, I must say. It actually started with Tony Blair. Tony Blair was probably the the moment in which the UK started going very much in the sort of um, far left fascist sort of move away from sort of centrist conservatism, free speech, liberalism, and all that sort of thing. But you see, liberalism then was a good thing. Liberalism now is not such a good thing. So it's changed quite a bit, which is the sad thing about it. Because I mean, 15, 20 years ago, I was considered liberal. I was pro free speech. I was pro democracy. I was pro freedom of education, access to all sorts of institutions that would uphold liberal principles. But liberalism now just means autocracy, lack of free speech, and basically a movement towards more dystopian control, sort of new world control, an order that controls everybody, what they do, what they say, where they go. It's actually really awful. And I mean,
But
when you
were
consider,
there already laws, some of these very strict hate speech laws and so on under Tony Blair, or is that a more recent thing?
it's slightly more recent, but the laws are not as much of a problem as the judiciary. Okay. And this is where we need to sort of hark back to how Britain began. So Britain has been celebrated as the birthplace of free speech. I mean, it's the cornerstone of democracy and intellectual progress. We must understand that. And it is rooted in Britain's intellectual evolution. Absolute intellectual and political evolution is the fact that Britain went from being a monarchy with censorship where you couldn't say anything against the king or the queen, you would be beheaded, to the point prior to Blair where you could pretty much say anything you liked and it would have been protected. Now, I mean, one of the most significant milestones, oddly enough, in England's movement towards free speech was John Milton's Aero Fatiga, I think it is. I can never pronounce this. Anyway, he published it in 1644, and it is a passionate expression of, and Milton argued, he said, give me liberty to know, to utter, and to argue freely according to conscience above all liberties. So Milton argued that even above life itself, the right to speak freely is more important. And that was a big movement away because, I mean, that was during a time of heavy censorship. And so we want to see Britain has moved. away from that. And I mean, the Bill of Rights in 1689 established parliamentary privileges and protections, setting a foundation for open debate without fear of any prosecution. So you could basically stand up at that time and be protected for saying anything you like, and there would be no repercussions. And figures like John Stuart Mill championed the importance of personal liberty. His 1859 essay on liberty remains the global seminal work on free speech, where he famously stated that the peculiar evil of silencing the expression of an opinion is that it is robbing the human race. So you are robbing humanity of one of its most fundamental rights by not allowing people free expression. I mean, that is momentous. To me, that is hugely momentous because it is the foundation of what humanity is built on. Being able to express yourself and being able to impart information and receive information. And how on earth do you impart information and receive information if you're going to stifle speech? And if you're going to stifle access to speech that you may not like or be comfortable with?
But now in Britain, as soon as you say anything about immigrants or
Well,
Islam or
I'll get to
anything like
that.
that,
Yeah.
okay.
So I'm going to get to that. So that's where we're going now. You see, this is the problem, and this is why I wanted to state that one of the most one of the and I mean, if you consider that the UK has given birth to figures like George Orwell, who wrote 1984, almost like he could predict what was going to happen in the country of his birth. And I mean, you consider that in 1855, when most other countries were in turmoil in that, Carpenter mounted his soapbox in the corner of Hyde Park in London, and he started complaining about high food prices. And after that, Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park became synonymous with free speech. You could go there. I've been there. I went to Hyde Park, stood on a box, and went off about something. And people used to gather round and they used to either jeer or they used to clap or they used to participate. And that is what it was. You cannot go into Hyde Park anymore and say anything. If you were to put up a soapbox in Hyde Park tomorrow and read verses from the Bible, you would be arrested.
Wow.
That is how bad it is in the UK now, that if you were to get on your soapbox in Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park, you would be arrested if you quoted verses from the Bible. And where you mentioned the fact, this is where we are now, but this is because of Tony Blair. And this is, I want to read a tweet from Liz Truss. Now, Liz Truss spent the shortest amount of time as Britain's Prime Minister. But what she said is recently a lady called Lucy Connolly was arrested for complaining about immigration, complaining about the level of violence that has come as a result of unchecked immigration, and especially after the Southport murders. Although Radikubani was not an immigrant in the general sense, his father was part and parcel of the Rwandan genocide. So his father was given sanctuary in the UK by Keir Starmer when Keir Starmer was head of the Crown Prosecution Services, but yet he was actually wanted in Rwanda on crimes against humanity. His son was the one that ended up killing the three girls in Southport. So, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. But anyway, Liz Truss made it very clear when she said Lucy Connolly should be released immediately and reunited with her family. So Lucy made comments about immigration, about how bad it is, and about what happened after the Southport attacks. And she was arrested and given 3 years. She's a mother, she's a family, she's
Wow.
actually the wife of a
Mm.
councillor. Yeah. She's the wife of a councillor. The severity of her sentence is completely unjustifiable and a shocking example of two-tier justice which now prevails in Britain. Tony Blair's constitutional vandalism in the mid-2000s abolished judicial accountability. We are now suffering the consequences of a system that has been captured by leftist ideology. And this, I think, is the most important part of what is happening in the UK, is that your judiciary is finished. Your judiciary. In fact, there are so many similarities between South Africa and England, except, of course, in Africa, you've never really had free speech. I mean, if your tribal leader or chieftain didn't like you, he'd kill you, or if he didn't like what you said. I mean, so Africa is not exactly synonymous with liberalism and free speech and civil liberties, but Britain is, and yet there is none of it left. I think it was Peter Lynch. He was arrested, given 3 years imprisonment for holding up a sign. Just a sign, wasn't violent, wasn't anything. He held up a sign to say that he was opposed to illegal immigration, also after the Southport attacks. He was given 3 years. He committed suicide in prison because he was beaten up, because they didn't monitor him in that. So he committed suicide. They wouldn't even let his son was imprisoned as well, wouldn't let his son out to attend his funeral. So I can give you thousands. In fact, even now, as we speak, they have allocated more money in the security budget, in the police budget. More money is allocated to the police to monitor people's social media and free speech issues than the combined budget to investigate murder, robbery, and rape.
Oh, that's astonishing. I mean, I don't people
That
I don't think people outside Britain actually realize the extent to which it's now become almost a totalitarian state.
Yeah, it's totally totalitarian. You dare not say anything on social media. We have a guy called Ben Wire on X. He's also quite pro-British, pro-national, very, very sort of like a little bit jingoistic and all that sort of thing, but more sort of being pro his country and stuff like it. The police found out who he was behind his account. Nothing salacious, nothing provocative, nothing violence. He's never called for violence or anything like that. They found his employer. They phoned his employer and told his employer to fire him. He's
Wow.
employed by Waitrose. Yes. And they fired him. But yet it's a totally anonymous account and all the rest of it. So there's no reflection on the company or anything. He's never called for violence or anything. He's just really pro-national, pro-British, pro St. George's flag, all the rest of it. And they've told him that he had to go. And I think, if I'm not mistaken as well, the head of the British, I wrote about it on X, the head of the British Blind Association or something. Look, I could be getting this wrong. I'll have to go. He followed. He never made a comment. He never said anything. He just followed Tommy Robinson on Tommy Robinson's X account. Somebody from the British Blind Association or something to that effect found his follow and reported him. He had to apologize and was, I think, suspended for a period of time just because he followed Tommy Robinson on X. Never said anything, never posted his stuff, never retweeted his stuff, just followed him.
Yeah, because if you
Nearly
follow
lost his job.
someone, it's not necessarily the case that you agree with that person's views. You're just
Exactly.
interested in what he's saying, or you even monitoring what he's saying. I mean, it could
Exactly.
be like following
This,
Julius Malema in South Africa, not because you like
yeah,
him, but
exactly.
because you just want to see what kind of idiotic comment he's coming up with next.
Exactly. I follow Fakil and Balula. I don't know what. I just want to know what ludicrous comment he's likely to come up with next. And we follow politicians. I mean, especially I follow politicians, of course, so that I can, monitor what they're saying. But this is it. But I mean, that's not the point. Point isn't about whether or not you agree or disagree. The fact is that You should be allowed to follow whoever you please, regardless of their political views. Sure, if you start to repost and you're in a sensitive position and stuff like that, I understand that staff, their views have an impact on a company as well. But following people and expressing certain views and stuff like that should not be a precursor or should not preclude you from having a job and enjoying a job and getting a job. And I mean, when you get to the stage, so you can actually put Britain now firmly in the position of a totalitarian state where you cannot get a job if you've ever said anything controversial. I think it was Ben Stokes, the cricket player. He made some comment about Muslims when he was 16 on Snapchat or something. Look, I could be open to correction. Do you know how he had to grovel and beg and say sorry and all the rest of it? And I'm thinking, why? Why? Who cares what you say? You have a right to an opinion. And yet you cannot. You cannot possibly have an opinion in this country. But if you're Muslim, you can put your rag down on the ground anywhere you like in the country, bend over, bash your head against the floor, and scream Allah, Allahu Akbar until you're blue in the face and nothing will happen to you. And that is where the two-tier justice system has come from, is come from Tony Blair. I mean, set aside the fact that Tony Blair's a war criminal. I mean, that was just one part of possibly the worst thing he could have ever done to the UK, was getting them embroiled in the Iraq war. But the next thing is that he directly interfered in the judiciary and basically destroyed it. There's no judicial independence in the United Kingdom anymore. I mean, Tommy Robinson is in jail for 3 years in solitary confinement because of free speech.
Yeah,
They don't like what he said.
that's
Can you
incredible.
imagine?
So,
And he's a
I
citizen,
mean,
Jim.
would you say it's sort of dangerous to almost visit the UK because they could, I mean, even if you're a foreigner, they could examine your social media accounts or somebody could
Oh,
denounce
absolutely.
you and they could arrest you at
Yes.
the airport and put you in jail for 3 years.
Yes. Do you know some of the really large? Well, why do you think Tommy Robinson fled the country and went to go and live in Spain? I mean, to think that Spain, who was up until a while ago Franco, was a socialist Marxist just hellhole, and now has even a freer has more civil liberties when it comes to free speech than the UK has. So people flee this country to be able to have free speech. There are large accounts on X where they don't live in the UK anymore. They've got themselves as they talk to a British audience, but they're not stationed. They live in Thailand, or they live in Portugal, or they live in Spain, so that they can have free speech and not be arrested and imprisoned and persecuted. Many people, to have any free speech in the UK, actually station their uh, their um, their accounts outside the borders of the country. So through VPNs and stuff like that, so that they don't use Wi-Fi, so you can't track them. The police will track your Wi-Fi. So they have VPNs so that they can, sort of maintain some sort of free speech from outside the borders of the country. Oh yeah. Welcome to hell.
But then, of course, some of the more radical immigrants and so on, they are free to publicize their views and to even call for violence and to have protests and whatever, and nothing happens to them.
No, nothing happens to them. I mean, these pro-Hamas marches have always, almost all, deteriorated into violence. Not one arrest. Very, very few. Maybe a handful out of all the pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas protests that there have been in London in the last sort of year since the war broke out after October 7th. They've all devolved into violence, and yet there's been maybe a handful of arrests, and all they get is a slap on the wrist and told to go home. I mean, during one of the riots just around the Southport area, it happened in it was happening in Hull, if I'm not mistaken. I'm trying to dredge this all up. There was a video of a guy that set fire to a bus, an Asian guy, probably Indian, thereabouts, possibly Muslim. But anyway, he set fire to a council bus. I mean, these buses cost what, 6, 7, 8 million pounds and that sort of thing. Set fire to a double-decker bus. Nothing ever happened to him. But yet, don't say anything. Don't say, I don't want illegal immigration. Don't say that all the knife crime or the large majority of the county lines knife crime that's occurring in the UK is as a result of people that are non-white. Don't you dare say that, because if you say that, you'll be imprisoned. But yet we have teenagers and we have kids that are stabbed almost daily in the UK. But what is Keir Starmer's response to that? Not getting rid of the people who are doing it. No, we'll ban knives and we'll ban these samurai swords. Yeah, that's a good thing. So it's the sword that gets up on its own and slashes people to death. There's no person behind it. But this is Starmer. But the thing is, Starmer's a globalist, and globalists want basically sort of this melting pot multiculturalism, because you don't want a strong nation. You don't want people who are strong and who are patriotic and who feel a national identity. You don't want people who have a strong national identity, because strength means that you will work together to oppose any form of totalitarianism. You've got to break down the family unit. You've got to break down your national pride. You've got to break down who you are. You've got to mix your races and all the rest of it. And that's the only way you're going to create havoc. I mean, look at what it's done to South Africa. Just look at what illegal migration has done to South Africa. That's Joburg. I mean, Joburg has been decimated. London looks like a combination between Afghanistan, Somalia, and Nigeria. There are now no-go zones in London. Can you imagine a city like London where there are areas where you daren't even go at all, as any person, whether you're white or black or anything? They are so crime-ridden now and so riddled with antisocial behavior that you dare not go there.
And then there are
So
still people who want to go and live in the UK, but I think they have a kind of a what we do, an anti or sort of an anachronistic view of the country. They haven't kept up with the news over there, and with the change in
no,
circumstances and the demographic changes and so on.
no, well, this is it. I mean, obviously, I think the thing is, if you're talking about South Africans coming to the UK and wanting to live in the UK, I think it's purely a matter of absolute necessity. Um, the necessity to earn money and that sort of thing. There are a lot of opportunities for South Africans because we are so well educated, because we are such hard workers, and because we come with a mountain of experience that most other people don't come with, or most of the local sort of population don't come with. And I think that's why there's always been such a favorable employment climate for South Africans. But as for actually living here, or living in the UK, it is an extremely claustrophobic and sort of, I mean, if I turn around and say almost an nihilistic type of existence, because people are afraid of their shadow, they don't say anything, they dare not do anything, they hyper vigilant, anybody, and this thing that, when it in COVID, oh, you should have been in the UK during COVID. That was by far the most horrifying wake up call of anything. Whereas South Africans, to a large degree, stuck together, it's an us and them situation, we're opposed. You had curtain twitches during COVID. People would be watching you through their curtains. She's outside, she's having a drink, or she's taking a walk and she's not allowed to. It's 5 o'clock, you have to be in your house, and all the rest of it. You have no idea just to what extent? I mean, we were horrified when you consider that you would think that British people would be the freedom-loving people that welcomed civil liberties and freedom of choice and freedom of everything. No chance. COVID bred a set of people that it was the worst thing possible. People would phone the police and say, "Oh, I've seen somebody taking a walk and they're not allowed to take a walk now. I've seen somebody buying something." Well, at least it wasn't as bad in the UK as it was in South Africa. You could buy alcohol and all the rest of it. But South Africa took British COVID and times it by 1,000 and then put it on steroids. But at least people didn't sort of tell on one another all the time. And I think that was one of the worst things that you could understand, how British society has devolved into this sort of like how would I say, almost like a mouse situation. You know, the mouse, they would scurry around and not say anything and not do anything and stuff like that. It's a nanny state, and it hasn't got that reputation for nothing, I can assure you. You are watched, you are monitored, you are told what you can do, when you can do it, how you can do it. Essex has got more cameras per square mile than any other place in the world watching you.
Well, you mentioned that they call him Stasi Starmer, and I
Yeah.
think in if I remember correctly, in East Germany, in the old GDR, as they used to call it, there were about 1 million people out of 17 million being watched at any one time.
Yes.
But do you think there are more people watched now in the UK than in East Germany, for example? And of course,
Absolutely.
with today's technology and data and so on, and the machines and the cameras,
Yeah.
watching you. I mean, the Stasi used to have little pods where they would write stuff,
That's
but
right.
it gets filed. But
And you could have certain signals that if you wanted to tell on your neighbor or whatever, you were rewarded for that. So if you came to the KGB or any one of the police and said, "Oh, my neighbor's doing this" or whatever, you would be rewarded for it. And there is almost that type of reward system going on in the UK. They've just allocated 230 million pounds to buy facial recognition software. And let me tell you something now. That facial recognition software is not to monitor terrorists and not to monitor people coming into the country that could be terrorists. Because when they come over on those little rubber dinghies and they wash themselves ashore on the Kent coastline, there are no cameras watching the fact that terrorists, they are scurried away by the Navy and the RNLI, and they put on these boats, and they have blankets put over their head and all the rest of it, and they are carried off. Nobody is watching who they are. That facial recognition software is for us. It's to watch us. And that is the most frightening thing, because I can tell you what's next in the UK is the credit system. You will not be able to buy food or buy this or do that if you say or do something that the government doesn't like. Already in certain shops in London and places, there is no teller. There is a recognition system where your face is photographed. You go, you have your groceries, you pay for your groceries, it's tallied up, it's taken off, present a card, present what you are, and all the rest of it, and you go off. So they monitor what you buy, where you spend, how you go. And yes, of course, the stores use this for marketing purposes. They want to know what products are being sold and stuff like that, which is perfectly legitimate and perfectly understandable. But the problem is those same systems are also set up to monitor you.
do you think the government has access to those systems?
Yes, I'm sure. Absolutely. Why wouldn't they?
But
They
but
can
there aren't
easily turn,
privacy
they can
laws.
monitor your bank statements. I mean, Farage lost his bank account at Coots because he was considered to be a politically, what do they call it? A political impacted person or something like that. There's some sort of terminology, so a person that has a political exposure. and stuff like that. They lost his bank account. All right, he's well known and all the rest of it. But there are people who will tell you that they're losing their bank accounts for things they say on social media.
Is that a
A
fact?
friend, that's a fact. I have a letter. I have a letter of a colleague that I worked for, or worked sort of with, but slightly higher than myself, who is quite active on Facebook. She received a letter to say that her activity on Facebook had been monitored and that she could be exposing herself. And as a result, her bank account was in jeopardy.
Okay. And how do the ordinary Britons feel about this? I mean, or do they just accept it as being, the way the world works or
Mm. Well, the
nowadays?
problem is that I have a lot of criticism of the British, and I'm not well accepted for that. Let me just say this. If you consider the fact that in 1939, 40, there were 15 and 16-year-old kids that were lying about their age so that they can go off to Europe, fight a war, and be killed, knowing exactly what was going to happen to them or potentially happen. Vast majority of them never came home. Those 15 and 16-year-olds that lied because, of course, they didn't have to and said, oh, I look 17, I'm fine. Yes, we'll just push you through. So these were people that were willing to go and die, whether or not the fact that that war was started, not by Germany, but anyway, that's a whole other
Mm,
discussion
mm, mm.
altogether. But the fact that you were willing to die for your country at that stage, and now 16-year-olds get a blister on their finger from using their PlayStation remote, and they're running off to the doctor. So this is the problem, and they talk about, I mean, Starmer's now talking about conscription, forcing 18 and 19-year-olds to join the army to go and fight Vladimir Putin in Russia. And the kids are going, absolutely no way. It's like, okay, besides the fact that they're more informed now, and none of them are going to go and fight a proxy war for any other country, especially not America and against Russia of all countries. But the reality is that they're just not built like that anymore. I mean, most of the British, I always turn around and say the British are scared of their own shadow. And that's what they've become like. They're just worried we better not stay anything and stuff like that, which is why Tommy Robinson has become such a hero in England. Not necessarily because everybody agrees with what he's saying, but because he has sacrificed literally everything: his marriage, his family, his life, his job, his home, everything he sacrificed so that he could speak up for Britain, British people, British society, British culture, British values. But he's one. He's only one.
Okay, and he's almost unique. There's no one else
He's
doing
unique.
that.
He's unique.
Well, what
There's
about
nobody else.
people
Lawrence
like
Fox,
Katie
maybe.
Hopkins and,
Katie Hopkins is great. Yeah, she
yeah.
does it as well. She doesn't seem to have the sort of like, how can I say, the sort of like following and the sort of support, the real kind of support that
Mm.
Tommy Robinson has. I mean, he has really wide-ranging support. But Katie Hopkins is great. So I think you're conservative, you're sort of right of centre, conservative people who stick up for British values and British culture and the way Britain was, and how great it was. It's just a handful. It's Lawrence Fox, it's Katie Hopkins, it's maybe and it's Tommy Robinson. I can count them on my 10 fingers, the amount of people. But there's nobody in government anymore. Nobody in government. Nobody. And even Nigel Farage, because he's a politician at the end of the day, he's got to be very careful. He can't turn around and alienate the entire Muslim vote. I mean, the chairman of his party is Muslim, for goodness sake. So, you can't possibly have, your party exposed like that, a politically exposed person. That's what I was, politically exposed person. So, and Katie Hopkins has lost her house. because of it. She was sued for libel. She should never have lost, but she lost a case of
Because of the
libel
judiciary.
because of the judiciary.
Okay.
Every single problem that we currently have in the United Kingdom can be put at the door of the judiciary and the political system. Nothing
Okay.
else.
Okay. Well, on that note, well, thank you very much for this interesting conversation. And if you haven't
Thanks, Dan.
subscribed to the channel yet, please do so. And until next time, goodbye.